Good evening, everyone. And today we have a wonderful guest with us today on Candid Meena, and his name is Dr. Ankit Shah. Now, Dr. Ankit Shah is a research associate in IIM Ahmedabad, and he's in the advisory board member of GNLU Legal Incubation Council. He has appeared on many mainstream media news channels as well as the leading Indian YouTube news channels and is an observer on geoeconomics and politics. So, welcome, Dr. Ankit ji, to our show.
Namaste. Namaste.
Yeah. So, friends, happy Independence Day. It was the 77th Independence Day today, and Prime Minister Modi ji, gave a very good speech, and he attacked the opposition, and he talked about how BJP is very confident of returning to power in 2024. So, Dr. Ankit ji, could you enlighten us as to Modi ji gave a speech today, right? And could you just summarize as
True.
to what are your thoughts about that?
So this has been Jaidev ji a historic speech in the sense that we are talking about plans up to 2047. That is when our country becomes 100 years. And then the major highlights of the speech, not just that he charted out the contribution that has happened, the growth that has happened in the last 9 years, and how that reflects as a change from the previous 60, 65 plus years that we had seen the governance in the country. The major highlights being, if you have noticed, the Deshvasiyo word is being replaced by the word Parivar Jan. So, somewhere down the line, he's talking about how important the family unit economics will be in the changing global scenario going forward. He's talking about that the world is going to look beyond the big cities. So we are talking about those specific urban fiat dollar cities worldwide, which we are seeing that they are facing dilution with the de-dollarization process that is going to speed up after the upcoming BRICS summit in South Africa. So this entire theme of change in terms of new world order, the financial reset, which is approaching around the year 2025, because we have our elections around mid 2024. November 2024 would be somewhere US election, and UK election expected around January 2025. So after that, undoubtedly, we are heading towards a big, great financial reset of the world, wherein we are shifting from a single country reserve currency to multiple country reserve currencies or operating currencies. And not just that, if by that time, uh, fortunately, if we see some BRICS currency coming up, then January 2025 onwards, we'll see discussions on the reset coming. So looking at that, when he says that the world is going to look beyond the big cities, the viewers need to know the background of how the big cities were created worldwide. So with the power of endless printing of the reserve currency that the Western world had over these decades, what happened was there was an individualism wave, a feminism wave, and a privacy, etc., kind of theories being floated among the Indian masses in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that the Westerners were, panicking that this country is newly independent, and if they go back with the continuous self-employment and entrepreneurship model, they will achieve back that 27% global GDP on an average contribution, which will be giving a more than 1,800 years that the subcontinent was giving. So they floated all these theories, wherein people started asking rights from their parents, brothers, sisters. They broke the joint family corpus. They took their share and came to these urban cities, which we see right now, and handed over that entire savings and corpus to the companies, and they themselves became jobbers. So this was the intent of destroying the farming, manufacturing, and entrepreneurship model based on which this entire Indian subcontinent was so rich for about 1800 years. So the same British colonial method of converting entire society into jobbers with a fake classroom format, stuffing people into four walls for 15 long years so that they do not know what market realities are about. This was being carried forward after pound being the single country reserve currency to now dollar being the single country reserve currency. So now when the prime minister says Parivar Jan, when this crisis has struck the West, those children who are not able to pay those EMIs are coming back to parents' home in the West. So the prime minister is hinting that the world is going to look beyond those big cities, because as we see those states, those fiat dollar states being created worldwide, be it London, be it Canberra, or be it Toronto, or be it New York, Chicago, or California, the way the commercial spaces are being emptied and moving towards a regulated collapse, you shouldn't be surprised some of the collateral damage would be seeing in our fiat dollar cities as well, who are dependent on NRI remittances, exports, and outsourcing projects. So that is why the prime minister was hinting at tier 2 and tier 3 cities, the rise of those. And he's been clear about how small towns and villages are at the forefront of innovations now. The youth should make most of these opportunities, startups and stuff like that. And he clearly told that Bharat is at a decisive turning point and has the strength to shape the new world order. And over the years, if you look at all his speeches, you can clearly find out how Bharat is now, as a terminology, phasing out India as a terminology. So the last three new laws which were introduced by the Home Minister in the last parliamentary session that closed, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita and all. So officially, Bharat as a term is phasing out India as a term. So it's not just about the politics that the opposition parties have named themselves as India, but it is about the colonial baggage that we need to move, shrug off and move forward to. So we are not obliged to be called or addressed by any names which the foreigners named us, be it the derivation of Indus civilization or the Indian Ocean. The fact of the matter is, it is they from outside looking at us named us based on those geographical connotations, because they were trying to search us uh, as a land of treasure. So when we say sone ki chidiya, so that chidiya connotation comes from this negative intent which they had, we can capture this one. So you shouldn't be surprised about the kind of changes that are coming in, that officially Bharat is coming back in terms of not just terminology, but in terms of geopolitics. You will find that most of these geographies, be it the Middle East or the Central Asian countries, we all understand those terminology when we say Tajikistan. That stan comes from stan, right? So and not just, even if you look at the Middle East, you know that the Kaaba of the Saudi Arabia goes the same line and length as the Somnath of Gujarat, and the Temple Mount of Jerusalem goes in the same line and length as Kedarnath. So I've been talking this on several channels, that we need to ultimately, because this de-dollarization process will result into a decolonization wave, wherein now you see that the CBSE has approved 22 regional languages. So because we were giving 27% to the world GDP without English language and without the reserve currency format. So the viewers need to know this fact, that there wasn't any English language. It's an imposition, colonial imposition. And since they had colonies worldwide, it became the operating language. Now that we move towards a financial reset, where the West is not going to have a single country reserve currency, the invoicing is not going to be in those currencies, the referencing of valuation of the invoices are not going to be in those currencies. What that ultimately means is that the Western clients will not be any more able to afford Asian services, even if you want to sell, right? That is the direction we are heading, which means that ultimately we will have to come back to the same family unit entrepreneurship model under the Sanatan economics format, which I say. So these are the kind of big geopolitical changes. This 3 decades have, as the Prime Minister rightly put out, has come out of after 1,000 years. This next 3 decades, that window of opportunity has opened up.
So, what is the new world order as of now? Like, which are the countries, which will be powerful, as in like US is undergoing inflation, right? Inflation is high in US, and you think that dollar can come down in value at some point of time in the future.
Hmm. So, 2021, I predicted that the US dollar would be 3 rupees by 2029. And looking at the factors that I see at this point in time, I would not wish to revise that prediction. So 3 INR is what I'm predicting for 2029. And See, there are three parts in the valuation of any currency. One is the natural resources that the country has if the currency is to be pegged. Second portion is the demand as a trading currency. And third portion is the demand as the savings currency. Now you got to understand, say if I'm to give you a story, five friends went to a hotel, and they said, the US friend is saying, let's pay the hotel bill in US dollar. The remaining four friends are saying, okay, iske paas hai, let him pay. So people are enjoying. Then the US friend says, whatever trade that we do between us, let us do in US dollar. Everyone says yes. So 180 plus nations destroyed the demand for their own currencies and artificially propped up the US dollar. Now the US friend says, let's do one thing. If that you need to now trade and earn the dollars first to do any kind of trade. Two of the friends were like, we are working slogging 12 14 hours, we're still not able to match up to the requirements to earn the US dollar, because as you see, 180 plus nations have propped up the valuation because of the demand. Now the US says, I'm going to set up institutions where you can go and take the US dollar loans. So that is how you see IMF, World Bank, and United Nations being set up after the Second World War. After that, what happens is the friend is two of the friends realize that this is now a total mafia kind of a loot that is going on. So one of the friends says, I'm going to de-dollarize. And suddenly the US friend says, looks like this guy got weapons of mass destruction. So that is what happens with him. The other guy says, I'm going to form an African Union and I'm going to peg the currency with gold and let us trade outside the US dollar. Now, that guy happened to be Gaddafi. So you understand the fate of both of them. Now, what happens is the US guy says that there's still this country which has a lot of brain. So let me unpack the dollar from the gold standard in 1971, offer fiat dollar salary levels to the brains, and let me take the brain to the US. So that is what happens with the 1971 fiat dollar birth. Birth of the entire services sector and the tech sector happens with the fiat dollar. The brains are taken there, but we still have data which says about 1,500 scientists being killed, and not a single case where we found out a Chinese or a Russian hand. So you understand what has happened. So a tech sector is being created with the fiat dollar. Entire talent taken over there by destroying manufacturing, farming, food processing, logistics, and all those core sectors. And they being handed over coolie jobs. So not just this sector, gets any kind of a brain output. The other sectors also being destroyed. Still not satisfied. They did this individualism, feminism way, broke the families, made them hand over the corpus, and turned everybody into jobbers. And that is how this fiat dollar cities were created. Mumbai, Pune, Hyderabad, Chennai, and Bangalore, with NRI remittances, exports, and outsourcing projects. Still not satisfied. They said, we are going to fund the startup ecosystem from the Wall Street finance directly from the Federal Reserve printing machine. Let those e-commerce portals sell below cost. So you see an onslaught of e-commerce portals who start selling below cost. So a product is 120 rupees being sold for 100 rupees. And the customers are surprised how this happens. And you see all of the offline trade shops being shutting down one after the other. So this entire gimmick of a kind of deceit and cheat of continuously printing the currencies and funding the NGOs and conversion activities and missionarization and radicalization process, all happening directly from the endless printing of the currency, enjoying the reserve currency status. So this is all went on and on, on and on. 1979, this guy goes to Deng Xiaoping, goes to President Carter. He's being told, you want technology from us, you finish off your own consumption. This guy comes back and imposes the single child policy in China, gets the technology and becomes the manufacturing giant that it is. Similarly, 1973, Kissinger goes to Saudi Arabia. They sign an oil for security program, entire crude oil to be sold in dollars, to artificially prop up again, as I said, the dollarization of the world. Uh, and you see how the radicalization of Middle East and the Indian subcontinent starts. I mean, prior to 1971, there was not a single black burqa in the Indian subcontinent. Prior to the fiat dollar of 1971, I'm repeating, there was not a single black burqa in this country. Prior to 1973 petrodollar, there were not a single city in India where the highways of both the sides purchased by a Muslim community. So you understand how dollarization went ahead along with radicalization and missionarization, with those NGOs, missionaries, and protest finance coming out endlessly printed from the Western countries. So this is how the dollarization of the world has happened. Uh, they just pass on their lifestyle bills to the rest of the world because the rest of the world has to do all trade in the US dollar. By 90s, the entire reserve currency bubble gets accumulated in the tech sector in the US. But the allies come up with the first ever de-dollarization of the world by launching the euro currency. And now the United States is panicked. So what they do is, they come up with this gimmick of mixing commercial banking with investment banking in the US. They remove the requirements, regulations of the keeping both the banking separate. So now the banks could play speculative trade with the people's money, uh, just to counter this de-dollarization move. Then they dragged the European Union in the Yugoslavia conflict to bring the value of euro down. And by the time European allies realize this, they say now we no more park our savings in the US Treasury. And with that, the entire bubble, reserve currency bubble accumulated in the tech sector, crashes in what we call as the dot-com crash of 2002, losing 78% valuations of the tech sector. This was the first ever de-dollarization in the world, wherein the tech sector lost 78% valuations. So currently what we are seeing is the final de-dollarization process, which means the tech sector is it's just going to get done with, right? So these are the changes that are happening now. Since the European Union said that we are no more going to park our savings, what happens is, China is taken to the WTO membership and given all the benefits of WTO. And in return, the Chinese Communist Party promises to park their savings in the US Treasury in place of the European allies. So this is how China became the manufacturing giant that it has become. So it wasn't the stealing of that, it was on purpose passing on of technology to make China the giant that it became. Now, because of the endless printing of currency, that they have already destroyed the family institution in the West with, as I say, Adam Smith causes 60% divorces and Karl Marx causes 60% slave population under state control. So, the Adam Smith capitalism, extreme capitalism, and with this debt-based model of endless printing of currency, well, many of those loans were now not being repaid, which caused the 2008 crisis. This time, when the United States printed dollars to bring Americans out of that crisis, passed on massive inflation across the world, and many of the Middle East governments started falling because of food inflation in what we call as the Arab Spring of 2011. This is the first time the Middle East realizes the heavy cost of continuing with the US dollar as the reserve currency, that they lost about 50% of their crude oil wealth in radicalizing India and Middle East just to keep the US dollar going. And now only 50% crude oil stock is left, and they do not know any economics because of the religious doctrine that they have. And now they start panicking. Now they are in search for an international partner who would help in the de-radicalization and de-dollarization process. And this is the exact opportune moment the prime minister sits in the government in India. So they see the prime minister as a partner for de-radicalizing and de-dollarizing the world. So the first visit comes of the Prince of UAE, the Crown Prince comes, and when he comes, he is shocked to see the entire country talking about the narrative of intolerant. Just like all Gujaratis were intolerant that they voted BJP to power for a decade plus, probably entire India became intolerant that moment. And when the UAE prince sees this, he goes back to UAE and declares a tolerance ministry for UAE. So now the arithmetic here is that we are going to solve the radicalization problem at the point of origin in the Middle East. So now the prince sends a prince to 2000 I think 2018 early, to the Akshardham temple in Delhi to visit and find out how yoga, Ayurveda, and mandirs can help de-radicalize the entire Gulf. So the prince attends the Akshardham temple and talks with the priests and stuff like that. And with that, the entire de-radicalization process of the Middle East begins. So, and along with that, the de-dollarization process as well, because in order to shift the reserve currency, what you need to do is to collection of physical gold. The prime minister first tries to collect the gold from the Indian citizens with a monetization of gold scheme, but that fails because the gold is Sanatan, and Indians won't part with gold, so that scheme failed. So he thought, let me de-dollarize this way, but then that didn't work. And then he came up with this idea of let's collect gold from the West. So all the Brazil, Russia, India, China, all the countries of the BRICS and the global south, that is Middle East, all central banks start collecting physical gold from the West. This is how the de-dollarization process started. And India said, now no more we are going to go for multilateral trade pacts, because if we do that, the dollar sits by default as a transaction currency. So India says no more. Each country will line up, they will come, we will negotiate, and we'll enter into individual free trade agreements with all the countries. And then the prime minister moves fast with the RuPay and the UPI cards to de-dollarize the world. So step by step, I mean, Russia and China has no clue that it's India who's leading the de-dollarization process. They just know one thing, and that is that the physical gold needs to be collected. They had no clue that India went so far. So this is how the entire de-dollarization process has started now. And we see that the BRICS summit is coming up, and there's a possible of a new payment system alternative of the SWIFT, and a committee would be formed for discussing, a technical committee of the BRICS nations to be formed to discuss possibility of a common currency replacing the US dollar. And we already, as we see just yesterday with the transaction completed of crude oil beyond the US dollar for the first time. So we already made a statement. We already made a statement that we are no more a financial colony of the United States yesterday. So this is how.
So how do you see India's future going ahead?
Well, see, this decade is going to be a tumultuous one, because the one fact that we know, that all these Western companies which understand, and as I see that they have selected India as the next global power, they are going to shift and settle operations in India. I mean, every meeting that a Western biggie you saw in the Prime Minister's office, they go with the India business head along, And then when they come out, they come up with India plans of investments and shifting of operations from the West. They go back home, they lay off people and shut down offices in the West. So it is very clear that by the end of this decade, not just that all these big Western companies are going to shift and settle in India, as I say that the top management is going to convert from a white to an NRI, and then from an NRI to a resident Indian by 2030 of all these big companies. This is a change, big geopolitical, geoeconomic change that we are going to see through this decade. So that's a big change coming in. And I see the gift city of Gandhinagar as the new mini World Bank of the world, wherein not just these biggies are going to come and put up their headquarters. I believe they are listing in the Gift City Exchange, stock exchange, particularly because they know that they are going to face a wipeout in the financial reset in the West. So, and the Prime Minister being very clear in his speech at France, addressing the diaspora, that don't tell that I didn't tell you. This is the point in time if you want to invest in India, and also start exploring the sectors you are working in India. So I think he's been unequivocal about the big financial reset which is coming. And not just that, we already saw how even the external affairs minister was talking about in one of the podcasts that visa is not going to be an issue, because the world that we are moving in is going to be to and fro. You complete the work and you can come back. That kind of liquid it's going to be. So I think everybody is hinting at the great financial reset which is going to come in some months from now after the elections. So in terms of Bharat, what we see as 2047, some of the predictions which I've already put out, which is UAE is going to be the first Hindu country, Saudi Arabia is going to be a Jewish majority, and Iran is going to be a Christian majority. uh, by 2040 you can see all of these changes. Not just that, in terms of the net security provision, from Saudi Arabia to Laos, Cambodia is the greater Indian subcontinent, which we can say, with Ayodhya as a central node for the Mandir ecosystem, seamlessly connecting from Saudi Arabia to Laos, Cambodia, all the Mandir ecosystems. The first one, most probably, I see is Mithila, Ayodhya, Lanka corridor. That could be the first one to be built in this Sanatan economics model. In terms of defense and security, what I'm seeing is, the UAE Air Force would be almost subsumed, or becoming like an interoperable with the Indian Air Force, because they have Rafales and they have Mirages. We also have Rafales and Mirages, probably for the same reason of interoperability, because after the financial reset, US will be no more in the global policing role, which means the entire defense capex need to be shared by the Indian subcontinent together. So I believe UAE Air Force becomes completely interoperable with the Indian Air Force, Saudi combat forces training in India and becoming interoperable, and Iranian Navy becoming interoperable with the Indian Navy on this side. And on the other side as well, you will see the Mandir revivals. We are already seeing how the Cambodian king visited India after 60 years. So the revival of Mandir ecosystem in Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Myanmar is something which is naturally going to flow. So we are seeing, and this parliament, as we know, is not made for just for India. It is for the Indian subcontinent altogether, which is why you don't have the central hall in this new parliament, because previously the foreign visitors used to address from there. But when somebody is coming from the Indian subcontinent, from Saudi Arabia to Laos, Cambodia, you don't have any central hall, which means they will have to sit in the Lok Sabha, and which justifies the role that we have in the Indian subcontinent.
So
So these are the
what
kind
will,
of
sorry, what will happen to China and Russia in the future? Like, is there any prediction?
well, the Chinese economy, thanks to the US dollar, the Xi Jinping has realized that they are going to face a 4-to-1 crisis from 2029, which means four grandparents, two parents, an earning person only one, and that guy does not get a woman to marry. So I see about 40 million Chinese men without any woman to marry from 2029 onwards. So that's a kind of, thanks to the dollar and the single
And,
child policies. So they have
and
become
how
aged
about Russia?
before being rich. They have become aged before being rich. And Xi Jinping realizes that after doing 4 decades of manufacturing for the entire world, what he made in profits is only 3 trillions in reserves. And the United States printed about $14 trillion in just the last 3 years and distributed to Americans for free. So he is on board this de-dollarization process because of this. He understands this, and he's okay with the massive unemployment and the accumulated reserve currency bubble bursting in its real estate. He's okay to take that pain. So he's aligned on this process. As long as Russia is concerned, see, you have to understand why there is a moment of new applications in BRICS, because BRICS was here for more than a decade. Nobody was interested. All right. If somebody wants to transact in fiat dollar or fiat currency, all the currencies are fiat. There's no need for joining BRICS, right? So you got to understand that all these new applications are coming because they want a new currency which is pegged with some finite commodity like gold or something like that, right? Because understand, after 25 30 years, these guys do not have the crude oil free stock coming out from the soil. What they will do, so they want savings in a currency which is backed by some actual asset, which is why they are applying for BRICS. So the Indian rupee has reserve currency features, not all, but compared to ruble and yuan, the Indian rupee has reserve currency features, which is savings currency demand, but it does not have the trade and manufacturing of that level to back it up, that India can bring a unipolar world. That's not possible at this point, to be honest. Yuan as a currency has trading currency features, but it does not have savings currency features. All right. Because it has the trade might to back it up, but it does not have the savings currency feature transparency, which is required for countries to hold yuan as a reserve currency. Ruble does not have reserve currency features, neither has trading currency features, but Russia is the richest country in terms of natural resources, commodities. So if currency is to be pegged with natural commodities, then Russia is the richest country in the world at this point in time, and will remain rich till 2047, because by next mid decade next year, you'll have those Arctic melting and the entire treasure coming up, and the new sea lanes under the Russian forces dominance. So in terms of commodities, it is very rich, but the currency does not have reserve currency feature or a trading currency feature. So since none of the three can bring about a unipolar world, I think they compromised and moved toward the BRICS bloc for the same reason. So these are the kind of changes which are coming in.
And how do you see the next year Lok Sabha election? You think BJP
Well,
will win with
I have last year itself I predicted 350 seats plus, and I think as of now I don't see any change in that prediction.
So Modi ji will come with a huge number next year. That's your prediction.
350 plus seats.
Yeah. So how do you see the Manipur situation really?
Well, there are 2-3 factors here. One, we already know about the drug, the Kuki community tango with the drug cartel, and last some months or years there's been a crackdown on that. So the frustration was already building up among that in that community. Plus, there were allegiances to linkages with some of the Myanmar elements involved in this, and the missionary funding was going on in the northeast for decades now from countries like Norway and New Zealand a lot. They had a big role in the missionary funding and the activities. So the clash was obviously supposed to happen. Whenever the cleanup happens, those who are going to be victims are going to react back. So as long as Manipur is concerned, the land, the soil, the language, everything belongs to the Meitei community. There's no doubt about it. And when they saw that this kind of infringement and this kind of domination that they have been facing, the clash was imminent. What happened that we see, but over a period of time, I mean, I've been recommending this two bills. One is confiscation of anti-national properties bill, and second was what I say is modernization of religious teaching bill, because ultimately you want all those premises, be it religious, be it commercial or residence, where you find any kind of illegal weapon storage, international content or international speeches, or you see that premises being used to indoctrinate young impressionable minds uh, under whatever the pretext. I think those kind of premises need to be put under security audit, and then if it is proven, then those need to be confiscated. And I'm very happy that the new three laws that has come up covers this kind of stuff, so that's already covered. But what I'm rooting for is modernization of religious teaching bill, because I believe that once this financial reset hits, uh, the job model which was imposed by the Britishers all across the colonies is going to take a huge hit, which means I'm talking about the services sector jobs, which means that the education sector is going to be asked after a few months that if there are not good job numbers, how do you justify stuffing people into this 15 years classroom, and why exactly are you testing memory when memory has no role in the market in making money? So I think uh, this colonial idea of the Britishers to feminize men by testing memory unnecessarily for this 15 long years, so that when they come out they have no clue about market, and they can't question the British or have thoughts of independence and stuff like that. That is what the motive was. Unfortunately, became the education sector in the world because they had colonies. I think after this de-dollarization process, the education sector will need to have a big revamp, because no piece of certificate would then guarantee you uh, something like 15, 20 years, which you thought, I mean, the generations till now think that they should have guarantee of work. So I do believe that the world is moving back towards the family unit entrepreneurship model. After the IT sector layoffs, you will see some of the banking sector layoffs. You'll see some consultancy sector layoffs. The entire services sector will take some or the other kind of hit. Not just that, the real estate of all these fiat dollar cities, be it New York, California, Chicago, London, Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, Mumbai, Chennai, all these fiat dollar cities where because this were NRI remittances and outsourcing projects, they are also going to dilute a bit. So I believe that we need to get rid of the British classroom format. We need to come back. Before the British classroom format, we had this Gurukul skill based education model. So we need to come back to that. And we also want those religions which are practicing hardcore religious doctrine, which does not cover contemporary subjects and skill sets. They also need to be brought into the mainstream, because you don't want a population which is uh, economically purposely being kept handicapped and then they being handed over stones, right? It's not just like for no reason that the stones go up to third floor, right? It doesn't go into your building or my building, it goes into specific buildings. So I believe that modernization of religious teaching is required to give pathway to the gurukuls, pathway to this religious madrasa education, to a higher education, so that the employment is possible and assimilating in the mainstream is possible, by sensitizing the content of the syllabus and making regulations for the qualification of the teachers who are teaching the skills, and giving them a modern pathway for employment as well. So taking a positive intent out of this is something that we need. Modernization of religious teaching will, because if you remove that influence imposition of 6th or 7th century lifestyle habits from the community's routine life, I think more or less the problems that we are facing would get solved. Understand one thing. When we talk about national security, shastras, what we call as shastras, that is, the curriculum or the information outlets, that is for your internal security. Because you know if that shastras or the curriculum or the information outlets are not nationalist, then unfortunately you will have to use shastra for internal security. In ancient India, Shastra was for internal security and Shastra was for external security. But if you fail in the curriculum and history, then unfortunately you'll have to use Shastra for internal security, which is a wrong way to go about. So I think that ancient Bharat model needs to come back, of Gurukul based education, skill based education model.
So there's a lot of anti-Indian forces, be it like China, be it the ISI, be it George Soros. So how do you see all these, India countering all these people?
Well, when we talk about this kind of funding that happens, every foreign contract or a foreign contribution actually needs to go through a national security provision or a filter kind of a thing, right? So that is something which hasn't happened, which is why, see, what globalization does is it removes the security of the physical border. So when you're able to talk to the enemy's population, bypassing the enemy's leadership, it is a lethal weapon of war. So when the violence that we saw in Mewat and Nu region, we understood that there were a lot many of Pakistani social media handles were able to pass on information, fake information, instigate and stuff like that. So this is what happens. If the enemy forces are able to talk to your population, bypassing the government, directly talk to them, then it is a lethal weapon of war. So you need to understand where you need to install the control points in this entire system, be it internet information technology, or be it the transactional warfare, because these kind of anti-national elements would use even the economic transactions to pursue these objectives. So you won't be surprised if you find that if almond is being sold by a Chinese or a Pakistani trader to a Kashmiri for 200 rupees a kilo, and this guy then sells for 800 rupees a kilo, and the remaining 600 goes for terror finance. So you need to understand that this kind of modus operandi, those tourist operators portals being used, where the entire tour is booked, the amount is paid online, and then the tour is cancelled, and the forfeited amount by the portal diverted towards protest finance. So all these anti-national foreign elements are going to play muck around if you open the doors, if your doors are not secure. So you will require that kind of a national security apparatus that closes all these doors.
So what do you see cryptocurrency playing a big role in these terrorist funding and everything?
Yes. So there's a big role of this
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin and this kind of payment systems, private cryptos, which is why I believe that after the financial reset, there will be a big clampdown on private cryptos for at least that particular role, which is a legal tender of money in terms of payment. I think that will not be allowed after the financial reset. So that is very clear. But until the financial reset comes, all these private cryptos will go up, particularly because the Western countries do not have as much physical gold to offer. Because whenever people doubt the financial system, they rush and collect physical gold. And since the Western countries do not have as much physical gold, when the panic strikes, they are going to fool the people saying private crypto is a good place to go. So temporary, it might shoot up for next 1.5 years, but when the financial reset comes, those governments, Western governments, are going to mandate those CBDC, central bank digital currency, and they will put a ban or whatever the checkpoints they will put on this private cryptos as a legal tender of money. So going forward, the problem with the private cryptos is twofold. One is it does not have jurisdiction. So tomorrow, if my screen shows from 50,000 it becomes 5,000, I don't know where should I go to get that issue addressed. I don't know who will I complain, right? Which means that it cannot be a stable store of value if the valuation is changing by words of mouth, right? Second thing, as I said, the central banks are not going to leave that role of regulating the currency, because currency is what the state borders stand on. So I don't think they're going to, not even the leaders will allow the central banks to leave that control of regulating currency, because otherwise all the schemes that they declare come out of that printing by the central banks. So I don't think either the politicians are going to allow it or the central banks. And anyways, even the people do not have any jurisdiction where to address the problem if there's a problem.
Yes. So how do you see the Russian-Ukraine war? Will it, keep on going to Poland or something? Do you see that? Or,
Well,
yeah.
The conflict, as I've been speaking since 2020, I predicted it already in November 21 that it is coming, and then in February I said the exact week that this is the week it's going to start. So I'm seeing it as a de-dollarization script, wherein the EU economies and currencies are being purposely being drowned so that the US dollar can survive some value. That is exactly what I look at it as, which means that it is going to drag until the financial crisis begins in the West, because they need some bakra out of Putin and Xi Jinping to blame someone for the financial crisis which is going to come. If if the Western alliance wanted to stop the de-dollarization process, then they would not have gone for attacking Ukraine. They would have selected Saudi Arabia, UAE, or some that kind of a country. But the very fact that they could not, that they decided that let's kill our allies rather than facing a nuclear Russia or a nuclear China. So I think they're almost a big chunk of their governance aligned on this de-dollarization process, because they understand that they now have 33 trillions of debts, and if they want to clean that slate of debt clean, the only method is the financial reset, because it's not possible to wipe off that massive mountain of debt without devaluation of the dollar. So even if Asia wants to export and give these goods and services to the West, uh, they have no chance, because the currency is going to devalue, right? So that is what it is.
And what do you think of the COVID, pandemic? Was it a part of the de-dollarization, do you think?
Well, I would not say it's as a part of de-dollarization, but I would certainly see it as an attempt made to bring down all the strong governments worldwide. And then you already understand that the private sector, that extreme capitalism won't lose that opportunity of making money, right? So I think it wasn't, the origin might not be extreme capitalism, but on the path they aligned with this COVID spread, just to make money out of it. But the intent was to bring down all the strong governments worldwide. That was something which was very much visible, because in the West that they have already destroyed the family institution with the endless printing of currency. The wife's role is the husband's role, the parents' role, the son's role, everything is the US dollar, right? The parents would kick the kids out at the age of 15, 16, because the state is going to take care of their Medicaid and from the printing machine, and the kids are going to get 0.1% loans, so they would also start their life. They say go to hell to their parents. So basically they destroyed the family institution with this endless printing of currency, and now they are going to face this financial reset, and then they are going to be left wondering why their population does not have any kind of productivity. They were just printing currency and consuming what the East produces. From underwear to hair dye to carpet to jeans, everything comes from outside.
So how do you see the future of Pakistan and ISI?
Well, see, the only alliance that I see in terms of geopolitics in the last 100 years was US deep state. Uh, Note that I didn't say US government. US deep state, UK government, Pakistan army, and the Chinese Communist Party. According to me, this was the only alliance. There was no NATO, there was no EU, there was no Quad, there was absolutely nothing, right? This was the only alliance. Now, after Balakot, since there wasn't any response from the Pakistan army in terms of launching a war, that faction got neutralized. Now, the second was the Chinese Communist Party. Since Xi Jinping, as I said, realized after working for 40 years, they became aged before being rich because of the US dollar. And then he's aligned to the de-dollarization process. He removed the only two pro-exports guys who were linked with the US deep state in the Politburo, Wang Yong and Li Keqiang. So both of them pro-exports were removed. Now the entire Politburo is anti-exports. Okay. So the CCP now became a Xi Jinping party. So from this alliance of last 100 years, two elements got knocked off. UK government now does not have any geopolitical weightage in terms of what it is facing in terms of the financial problems that, since January 2022, none of the allies have parked their savings in the US Treasury, which means every currency that the US and the European Union prints, the inflation passes on to their own people, which they were passing on to the rest of the world since the last 50 years. So now they are not able to pass on to the rest of the world. So, which is why the UK economy is in trouble. Now, the only part left is the US deep state, which has already picked India as the next power and started shifting the operations. So, when we say deep state, uh, this deep state is the same aristocrat family legacy. Somebody say Illuminati, somebody would say some other word, committee of
Rothschild.
300, committee of 300, whatever, different terminology. But basically, they dump a country as soon as the interest expense crosses the defense spending. So when the UK interest expense crossed the defense spending, they dumped UK and selected US. Now US is in that position, interest expense has crossed the defense spending. They've dumped US and now selected India. That's what it is.
So what is George Soros? Is he part of the deep state, you think, or is he?
Well, of course, he is linked to the US deep state, and I believe that the only problem with one faction of the deep state is that not that they have already selected India as the next power to be built. Uh, the only problem one part of the faction has, according to me, is racism. They have this white racism, and they are not okay with a brown guy sitting on top of their head. So they've selected India, but this is the mental tussle that they are facing right now.
Yeah. So how do you see India-Russia relations in the future?
Well, I believe that India, Russia will move ahead with a lot of non-defense stuff going forward, and a lot of defense stuff will be mainly with the West. So this tech transfer and stuff will come to India. The production would be in India, and then exports of these arms will happen from India. But Russia's portion in the defense deals would now gradually reduce, and the non-defense, because see, understand, previously US was the global power, so it could consume everything. Uh, you didn't had as much defense trade with them, and Russia was a poor country. After the financial reset, the positions have flipped. Now Russia has a lot of natural resources with which the currency is going to be pegged, which means the Russian purchasing power will be highest, which means non-defense trade are going to be with Russia, and the defense trade is going to be with US. That's the flip which has happened. Okay, the role has completely flipped between the two. So more and more people to people and business ties, manufacturing, industrialization, and stuff like that with Russia. So I will not be surprised in a few years if Russia is being declared a reciprocating territory, which the status UAE also has, which means a lot of legal frameworks will also match. Something which is given a verdict over here will be treated as a verdict in the legal framework there as well. A lot many regulations will be tweaked in Russia for the Indian citizens, be it for education, staying, or for investment purpose. So that ties are going to be more and more people to people. The societies, both of them societies, are going to liberate a lot, because the Chinese Communist Party, when it does not require a pro export model, what that translates into is liberalizing the society, right? And a lot of manufacturing which causes exploitation, cheap labor, and pollution, uh, more exploitation of natural resource. Now that burden will shift to the west. So US has already started shifting a lot of manufacturing to Mexico and Canada from China. So this is now the pollution will also shift to the west.
So yeah, one last question. How do you see artificial intelligence? Is it a like gift, or do you see it taking away many traditional jobs, right, in the market?
Mhm. See, when we talk about the four factors of production, men, machine, the main four: men, machine, market, and money. Now, the men factor of production, as far as Sanatan economics model is concerned, I believe that man factor of production should be at the core, which means the rest of the factors of production are supposed to complement the man factor of production, not compete with the man factor of production. Now, with a country which has this big a population, if we allow that kind of an Adam Smith extreme capitalism of the benefits of division of labor, where we take the machine factor of production on our head and reduce the head counts and the working. Understand, whenever there is a lot of exploitation by a capitalist, then you will have a Karl Marx born asking for freebies. Okay, so when Adam Smith came with this capitalism model, talking about benefits of division of labor, and passed on the 90% wealth of the nation in the hands of 5% industrialists, then after that exploitation, Karl Marx was born asking for freebies, saying, "Kya, when you have already done the exploitation of the society, now give me for free." All right. So I don't think we should go either of the extremes. We should keep man factor of production at the core. And in the next book, which is the Sanatan economics model, I'm coming up with new kind of indexes where the machine factor of production also needs to be remain in a particular indexes and formulas. It should remain in that healthy level. So I think that is something that we need to work on in future.
Yeah. So is there anything else you would like to add, Ankit ji?
Well, I think uh, in the south specific, I witness, because Gujarati and Marwadi families, the kid already knows from class 1 that what is going on is totally stupid. So by the age of 20, they have 2 3 shops of their own. So I believe that the western belt maintained that Sanatan family unit entrepreneurship model. The kind of changes that are coming in terms of this de-dollarization process, I believe that it's a responsibility of the parents in South India uh, to help those kids absorb the shock that would come with the de-dollarization process. Because I've been handling some of the cases from Bangalore, where the salary is coming down from 1.5 crore to 30 lakhs. So you can understand the mental disturbance that it causes. So I think it's a parent's responsibility to bring the children back home, let them stay with the family members. And this is all just the IT sector was actually born out of that fiat dollar. You can't do anything about it, that they are not being will be able to pay you. Now how do you expect anybody to do anything about it when the payers are not going to be able to pay. Okay, so nobody can do anything about it, but we need to give, over a period of time, we need to give that kind of atmosphere at home where parents allow their kids to fail. Let them try some business idea, let them fail. Understand, stock market capitalization is a proof that the parents do not trust their own child to park their investments in, right? The stock market capitalization is a proof that the classroom format has totally failed and collapsed, right? So when the parents are investing outside in companies instead of their own kids, what does it say about the education format, right? So we need to come back to that skill based education model where the gurukul's skill based setup was there, and help our kids go for those kind of opportunities of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, thanks, Ankit ji, for this wonderful session, and we will hope you join us in other future sessions on different topics.
Sure. Thank
Jai
you.
Hind. Thank you, Jai
Jai
Hind.
Hind.